The transformation of the first void touch sent waves of energy throughout the ancient structure, and Jake could feel hundreds of other entities responding to what had happened as they sensed the possibility of their own healing for the first time in millions of years. Captain, the other containment barriers are destabilizing, but not from the entities trying to break out, Lisa reported while her instruments showed readings that defied everything they knew about physics. They are opening themselves because they want to be healed too. The entity that had once been pure darkness now floated before them as a being of light and creative energy that pulsed with the rhythm of star formation and galaxy birth, and Jake could feel its gratitude flowing through his mind like warm sunlight. Nathan stood watching with amazement as everything he had believed about the prison and its purpose was proven wrong. In 200 years, I never imagined that healing was possible. Amanda was taking readings as fast as her equipment could process them, while reality continued to reshape itself around the activated failsafe device. The quantum structure of space itself is changing, and I think the entity is trying to repair damage that was done millions of years ago. Ryan worked frantically with the engineering systems as more containment barriers opened. An additional void touched approached the chamber where the healing device waited to transform them back into their original nature. The power requirements are enormous, but the device seems to be drawing energy from the transformation process itself, Ryan reported while monitoring systems that were far beyond human technology. Each entity that gets healed provides power for the next one. Jake maintained his mental connection to the failsafe device while dozens of shadow entities entered the chamber and approached the sphere of light with something that looked like reverence rather than hunger. They remember what they used to be, Jake said while feeling the collective memory of beings who had once helped create the building blocks of reality. And they want to go home. The healing process accelerated as more entities were transformed and began working together to repair not just themselves, but the structure around them and the very fabric of space that had been damaged by their corrupted presence. Lisa watched her instruments with wonder as readings showed that the ancient prison was changing into something completely different. The entire structure is becoming a beacon instead of a containment facility. Through the viewports, they could see that the dead ships scattered throughout the chamber were beginning to glow with new life as the healing energy reached them and began restoring what had been lost to entropy and time. Nathan felt tears running down his face as he realized that his long imprisonment had not been in vain, but had served to keep the possibility of this moment alive until humans could arrive. To make it happen, my team would be proud to know that their sacrifice led to healing instead of just more death, Nathan said while watching shadows transform into light all around them. Amanda made a discovery that changed their understanding of everything that had happened. Captain, the entity that we healed first is trying to communicate something important about other structures like this one. Jake opened his mind to receive the message and found himself seeing images of similar prisons scattered throughout the galaxy, each containing void touch that were waiting for the same kind of healing they had provided here. There are dozens of them, and they are all connected through quantum entanglement, Jake reported while the entity showed him a map of the galaxy with bright points marking the locations of other facilities. What we did here has already begun affecting the others. The transformation process continued for hours as hundreds of entities were healed and began working together to convert the prison into a center for cosmic restoration that would help repair damage throughout the galaxy. Ryan discovered that the ancient technology was now responding to human commands as if it had been designed specifically for them to operate. Captain, I think the architects always intended for this to happen, but they could not do it themselves. They built the prisons to contain the damage until a species evolved that could provide the emotional and creative energy needed for healing. Ryan continued while operating controls that seemed to anticipate his thoughts. Humans were not just the key to the locks, but the medicine for the disease. Lisa experienced a final vision that showed her the ultimate purpose behind everything that had happened, and the role that humanity was meant to play in the cosmic order. We are not just explorers or conquerors, but healers on a galactic scale, Lisa said while watching the transformed entities begin to leave the structure to carry their healing energy to other parts of the universe. This is why humans developed the way we did. Nathan realized that his long isolation was finally coming to an end as the structure around them completed its transformation into something beautiful and purposeful. I can go home now knowing that the universe is safer because of what we accomplished here. But Jake understood that their work was just beginning because there were other prisons waiting to be converted and other damaged entities waiting to be healed across the galaxy. We cannot leave yet, Jake told his crew while studying the galaxy map that showed the locations of dozens of other facilities. We have a responsibility to complete what we started here, Amanda agreed, because her scientific mind was fascinated by the implications of what they had discovered. This could be the most important mission in human history, the structure finished its transformation and became a beacon of healing energy that could be seen across interstellar distances. Sending a signal to other prisons that help was finally available. Ryan had learned enough about the ancient technology to pilot the converted structure through space to reach the other facilities that needed their help. The architects built it to be mobile once its primary mission was complete. Ryan explained while familiarizing himself with navigation systems that operated on principles beyond human science. We can take this beacon to every prison in the galaxy. Lisa discovered that her enhanced connection to the structure allowed her to communicate with the other facilities and coordinate their efforts across vast distances. Nathan volunteered to stay behind and establish a monitoring station to ensure that the healing process remained stable while the Pioneer crew traveled to other locations. Someone needs to watch over what we accomplished here, Nathan said while accepting his new role as Guardian of Humanity, first major achievement in cosmic healing. And I have experience with long-term assignments. Jake made the decision that would define the rest of their lives as they accepted their role as the first human team dedicated to healing the ancient wounds that threatened the stability of the galaxy. We came out here to explore the unknown, Jake said while his crew prepared for a mission that might take years or decades to complete. But we found something much more important. Amanda smiled as she realized that her career in xenobiology had led her to the greatest discovery possible, the chance to heal beings that were older than human civilization and help restore balance to the universe itself. The Pioneer departed from the transformed structure with its crew now serving as cosmic healers, who would spend their lives traveling from prison to prison until every void-touched entity had been restored to its original nature as a force for creation rather than destruction. The containment barriers were failing faster than anyone had predicted, and Jake could see dark shapes pressing against the weakening walls as the void touched began to break through into their reality, bringing with them a cold that went deeper than space and a darkness that consumed light itself. Captain, we have maybe 2 hours before the first barrier collapses completely, Lisa reported from her station while monitoring the prison systems that were sending alarms throughout the structure. And once one of them gets free, the others will follow quickly. Nathan stood before the fail-safe device with resignation in his eyes because he believed that his death was the only way to save the galaxy from destruction. I have been preparing for this moment for 200 years, and I am ready to make the sacrifice that my team made before me. But Jake had been thinking about everything they had learned, and he believed there might be another way to use the device that did not require anyone to die. Colonel, what if the architects were wrong about how the failsafe works? Amanda was studying readings from her scanner while she examined the device and the crystalline structures that surrounded it. The power requirements are enormous, but they do not necessarily have to come from death. Ryan had been working with the engineering systems and had discovered that the entire structure was designed to amplify human consciousness rather than simply drain it. Captain, I think the device is meant to work with living humans, not dead ones. The architects could never understand how human emotions and creativity work, because they were purely logical beings, Jake said while he studied the sphere of light that pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. Maybe we can find a way to power the device with life instead of death. Lisa suddenly gasped and staggered as another vision struck her with images of possible futures spreading out like branches of a tree. I can see it now. The device is not meant to destroy the void touch, but to transform them. She described what she was seeing to the others, while the shadows beyond the barriers grew larger and more aggressive in their attempts to break free. The architects saw them as pure evil. But what if they are something else entirely? Nathan looked confused because everything he had learned during his imprisonment suggested that the void touched were entities of absolute destruction. Lisa, what do you mean transform them? In my visions, I see that they were not always creatures of entropy, Lisa explained while touching the failsafe device and feeling its power respond to her thoughts. They were once part of the universe's creative force, but something happened to corrupt them. Amanda ran more scans and found evidence that supported Lisa's theory in the quantum structure of the prison itself. The containment fields are not just holding them but trying to heal some kind of damage to their essential nature. Jake began to understand what the architects had been trying to achieve but had failed to accomplish because they lacked the human capacity for hope and redemption. So the failsafe is not a weapon but a healing device. Ryan worked frantically with the engineering systems as alarms continued to sound and the first cracks began to appear in the containment barriers. If that is true, then we need to activate it before they break free completely. The shadows beyond the barriers had grown so large that they were visible through the walls, and Jake could hear whispers in his mind promising him power and knowledge if he would just open the doors and let them out. They are trying to influence us, Nathan warned while fighting against the mental pressure that was affecting everyone in the chamber. Do not listen to what they promise because it is all lies. But Amanda had a different interpretation based on her scientific analysis of the situation. What if they are not lying but are genuinely asking for help in the only way they know how? Jake made a decision that would determine the fate of not just his crew but potentially the entire galaxy. We are going to try to activate the failsafe device, but we are going to do it together as a team. He gathered his crew around the device while Nathan watched with amazement as they linked their hands and focused their combined consciousness on the sphere of light that began to glow brighter in response to their united will. Everyone think about creation instead of destruction, Jake instructed while he felt the device drawing power from their combined life force but not draining it. Think about building and healing and growing. The sphere began to pulse with colors that had no names while the crystalline structures around it resonated with harmonics that seemed to sing with the voice of the universe itself. Lisa cried out as her visions intensified and she saw the true history of the void, touched as beings who had once helped create stars and planets, but had been wounded by some cosmic trauma that turned their creative power into destructive hunger. They are not evil, Lisa said while tears ran down her face. They are in pain and have been trying to return to what they once were. The failsafe device reached full activation as the first void touched broke completely through its barrier and entered their reality, bringing with it a cold that froze the air and darkness that made the lights dim throughout the chamber. Jake felt the entity approaching them with hunger and desperation, but also with something that might have been hope, and he made a choice that went against every instinct for survival. Instead of using the device as a weapon, he opened his mind completely to the void, touched and offered it not destruction but understanding and the possibility of healing. The entity paused in its advance as it felt human consciousness touching its own tortured existence for the first time in millions of years, and Jake could sense its confusion and surprise at being offered compassion instead of fear. We know what you were before, Jake said while maintaining his connection to both the device and the entity, and we want to help you become that again. The void touched reached out with tendrils of shadow that touched the sphere of light, and for a moment, everything in the chamber went completely white as creation and entropy met and found balance. Nathan watched in amazement as the entity began to change from a creature of darkness into something beautiful and bright that pulsed with the same creative force that had once helped build the universe. It is working, Amanda shouted over the sound of reality reshaping itself around them. The device is healing them instead of destroying them. But Jake could feel that this was just the beginning because there were hundreds of other void touched still contained in the prison, and each one would need the same kind of healing that required human consciousness to guide the process. The days that followed were filled with strange events that tested the sanity of everyone aboard the Pioneer as the ancient structure around them continued to change and react to their presence in ways that defied all understanding of physics. And reality Lisa was the first to experience something beyond normal when she was alone on the bridge during her night watch and suddenly found herself standing in what looked like ancient Earth but with impossible architecture reaching toward alien stars. And she could hear voices speaking in languages that predated human civilization by millions of years. "I saw them," Lisa told Jake the next morning while she sat in the medical bay with Amanda running scans to make sure she was physically unharmed. The architects were tall and graceful, with silver skin and eyes like liquid starlight, and they were watching human development from the very beginning. Amanda frowned at her scanner readings because everything showed that Lisa was perfectly healthy. Despite her claims of being transported through time and space, describe what you saw in more detail, because this could be important for understanding what is happening to us. "I saw early humans learning to use fire and tools while architect observers made notes and adjustments to ensure our development. Followed the right path," Lisa said while staring at something only she could see. "They guided us through agriculture and civilization and science, always staying hidden but always influencing our choices." Jake listened carefully because he had noticed that the structure seemed to respond differently when Lisa was on duty, and he wondered if her navigator training made her more sensitive to whatever forces were at work in this place. Meanwhile, Ryan was having his own problems in the engineering sections where he had been trying to understand the technology that kept the prison functioning. And he found that touching certain control surfaces gave him flashes of memory that did not belong to him. "Captain, the systems down here are not just machines, but somehow alive," Ryan reported over the communication system while he worked to map the prison controls. "When I interface with them, I can feel the thoughts and emotions of the beings who built them." The engineering deck had become a maze of corridors that seemed to change layout when no one was looking, and Ryan often found himself in rooms that had not existed the day before but were filled with technology beyond human understanding. Nathan spent most of his time trying to guide them through the dangerous areas of the structure while warning them about the signs that indicated the void touched were becoming more active in their containment areas. "The temperature drops and light seems to bend when they are near," Nathan explained while leading Jake and Amanda through a section where the walls showed glimpses of something dark moving beyond the barriers. "And you will hear whispers in your mind promising you things you want if you will just open the doors." Amanda had been using her scientific training to study the prison systems and had discovered that the entire structure was powered by consciousness itself rather than any conventional energy source. And the more she learned, the more frightened she became. The architects did not just build a prison, but created a living system that feeds on the thoughts and emotions of thinking beings. Amanda told Jake while they stood in what Nathan called the memory core chamber, "Every person who has ever been trapped here becomes part of the system." The chamber was filled with crystalline structures that glowed with soft light, and when Amanda touched one, she experienced the final moments of Nathan's original mission team as they gave their lives to maintain the prison barriers. "I felt what they felt when they made their choice," Amanda said with tears in her eyes while Jake helped her step away from the memory crystals. They knew they were going to die, but they also knew that billions of lives across the galaxy depended on their sacrifice. Jake was experiencing his own visions during his sleep periods when he dreamed of being connected to every human who had ever lived and feeling their collective will to survive and protect what they loved. The human element is not just about our neural patterns, Jake realized while discussing their situation with Nathan in the observation deck. It is about our emotional capacity and our willingness to make difficult choices for the greater good. Nathan nodded sadly while watching the shadows beyond the barriers grow stronger with each passing hour. That is what the architects never understood about themselves and why they failed in the end. They were purely logical beings who saw the universe as a problem to be solved. Nathan continued while pointing to areas where the containment was visibly weakening. "But the void touched are not just entities of destruction but the universe's own doubt about whether existence is better than nothingness." Lisa joined them in the observation deck and reported that her visions had become stronger and more frequent. showing her not just the past but possible futures depending on the choices they made. I have seen what happens if the void-touched escape, Lisa said with fear in her voice while she described images of galaxies going dark one by one. But I have also seen something else that might be possible. The architects built a fail-safe device, but they were afraid to use it because they did not understand what it would do. Lisa continued while Jake and Nathan listened carefully. It was designed to work with human consciousness in a way that their logical minds could not comprehend. Amanda returned from her studies of the prison systems with news that made their situation even more urgent. The containment barriers are failing faster than Nathan predicted, and we have maybe hours before the first void-touched breaks free. Ryan's voice came over the communication system from the engineering deck, where he had been working to understand the fail-safe device that Lisa had seen in her visions. Captain, I found it, but the activation requirements are not what any of us expected. Jake led his team to the engineering deck where Ryan had discovered a chamber hidden behind walls that had seemed solid until he touched them with the right combination of human thought and emotion. The device is not a weapon in any conventional sense, Ryan explained while they stood before something that looked like a sphere of pure light suspended in a framework of crystalline structures. It requires the complete neural pattern of a human being who willingly gives their life force to power it. Nathan stepped forward with understanding in his eyes. This is what I was kept alive for all these years, to serve as the power source for the failsafe when the time came. But Jake shook his head because he had begun to understand something that even Nathan had missed during his long imprisonment. No, Colonel, the device needs something more than just one person's sacrifice. The architects failed because they thought in terms of destruction and containment, Jake said while studying the failsafe device. But humanity might be able to find a different solution entirely. Nathan Brooks sat in the conference room aboard the Pioneer with Jake and his senior staff, while outside the ship, the ancient structure continued to pulse with lights that seemed to respond to their presence, and the colonel began to tell them about the horrible truth he had discovered during his 2 centuries of imprisonment in this place. My mission team consisted of 12 people, including myself, and we came here following signals that Earth Command thought might be from a lost colony ship, Nathan said while his hands shook slightly as he remembered events from long ago. But when we arrived and were pulled inside just like you were, we found something far worse than a lost ship. Amanda leaned forward with her recorder running too. Capture every word, because this was the most important discovery in human history. And she could see that Nathan was struggling with memories that no person should have to carry alone. The beings who built this place called themselves the Architects, and they were an ancient race that existed millions of years before humans even walked upright on Earth, Nathan continued while staring at something only he could see. They built this prison to contain entities they called the Void, touched, who consume reality itself and turn everything into empty nothingness. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair because the engineering part of his mind was trying to understand how any technology could be powerful enough to imprison beings that could destroy reality. How do you know all this, Colonel? Jake asked while watching Nathan carefully for any signs that the long isolation might have affected his mind. And why were humans specifically drawn to this place? Nathan stood up and walked to the viewport where he could see the symbols on the structure walls growing brighter as more time passed. The architects left behind memory cores that activated. When my team arrived and they showed us the history of this place and our part in it, he turned back to face the group, and Jake could see ancient pain in his eyes, mixed with knowledge that no human was meant to possess. Earth was chosen by the architects long before humans developed spaceflight because our neural patterns are unique in the galaxy, Nathan explained while Amanda took notes as fast as she could write. Human consciousness operates on a frequency that can either strengthen or weaken the barriers that keep the void touched contained. Lisa looked up from her datapad where she had been reviewing sensor readings from their time inside the structure. Are you saying that the architects somehow guided human evolution to create people with the right kind of minds to maintain this prison? Not just guided it, but actively influenced it, through subtle interventions over thousands of years, Nathan replied while moving back to his seat. Every major leap in human development was nudged along by architect technology hidden on Earth and in our solar system. The room fell silent as everyone tried to process what they were hearing and the implications for everything they thought. They knew about human history and development, but something went wrong with my mission, Nathan continued with sadness in his voice. When we arrived, the prison systems were already failing because they had been running without maintenance for too long, and the presence of humans was supposed to fix that. Amanda looked up from her notes with a question that she was afraid to ask. What happened to the rest of your team? Colonel Nathan closed his eyes and was quiet for a long moment before answering. They sacrificed themselves one by one to keep the prison stable while I was kept alive in the cryogenic pod to serve as a living key for the containment systems. Jake felt anger rising in his chest at the thought of people being used as living batteries for an alien prison. And now that we are here, the same thing is expected of us. The arrival of more humans has changed everything, Nathan said, while standing again and pacing around the room. The prison systems are responding to your presence, but they are also becoming unstable because there are now too many human neural patterns in close proximity. Ryan spoke up with worry in his voice. What exactly are these void touch things, and what happens if they escape from this prison? Nathan stopped pacing and looked directly at Ryan with an expression that made everyone in the room feel cold. They are entities of pure entropy that exist only to unmake everything that has ever been created and turn the universe back into the empty void it was before the first stars were born. The architects fought them for millions of years before finally building this prison and others like it scattered across the galaxy. Nathan continued while the lights in the structure outside grew even brighter, but the cost of containing them was the destruction of their entire civilization. Amanda asked the question that everyone was thinking. Are there other prisons like this one? And are they all dependent on human consciousness to maintain them? Yes, and that is why humanity has been developing the way it has, Nathan replied while moving to the viewport again. We are not just explorers or conquerors, but the inheritors of a cosmic responsibility that we never asked for. Jake stood up and joined Nathan at the viewport, where they could see strange shadows moving in the distance between the walls of the structure. So what are our options, Colonel? Because I will not sacrifice my crew to maintain an alien prison. That is what I thought too, Captain, but the alternatives are even worse, Nathan said while pointing to the shadows that seemed to be growing larger and darker. Those are manifestations of the void touched beginning to break through their containment. The prison systems are failing because your arrival has disrupted the delicate balance that my life force was maintaining, Nathan explained while alarms began to sound throughout the ship. We have perhaps days before the barriers collapse completely and they break free to consume this galaxy. Lisa looked up from her station where she had been monitoring the structure. Captain, the energy readings are spiking and something is happening to the walls around us. Through the viewport, they could see that the symbols on the structure walls were now pulsing rapidly, and sections of what had seemed like solid metal were becoming transparent to reveal glimpses of something dark and terrible moving beyond. We need to find another solution, Jake said with determination while turning to face his crew. There has to be a way to stop these things without sacrificing ourselves. Nathan smiled sadly and shook his head. Captain, I have had 200 years to think about this problem, and the only alternatives are to either take my place as the living key or find the failsafe device the architects built before they died. The Pioneer shook and groaned as invisible forces pulled the ship through what seemed like solid metal walls that opened like water before them and closed again behind them, leaving Jake and his crew trapped inside a vast hollow space that stretched beyond the reach of their lights. And the captain gripped his command chair while trying to understand what had just happened to his ship, and crew emergency lighting cast red shadows across the bridge as Ryan worked frantically at his station to restore main power while Lisa checked their position and found that all her instruments were giving readings that made no sense, showing they were somehow inside the massive structure they had been studying from a distance just moments before. All systems are coming back online, Captain, but our location readings are impossible, Lisa reported while staring at displays that showed they were suspended in empty space inside something that should not exist. According to sensors, we are in a chamber that is thousands of kilometers wide, but that cannot be right. Amanda moved to the observation deck with her portable scanner and gasped when she saw what lay beyond the ship, calling for Jake to come and see something that would change everything they thought they knew about the universe and their place in it. The space around them was filled with strange lights that pulsed in patterns like a heartbeat. And floating in the distance were the broken remains of ships from dozens of different alien civilizations, some so old they looked like fossils, while others seemed more recent but still ancient by human standards. "Captain, there are life signs out there," Amanda said with excitement and fear mixing in her voice while she adjusted her scanner to get better readings. "Most of them are very weak, but there is something stronger coming from what looks like the center of this place." Jake ordered his crew to prepare a shuttle for exploration because the Pioneer was too big to navigate safely through the debris field of dead ships, and within an hour he was leading a small team, including Amanda and 2 security officers, toward the source of the strongest life signs they had detected. The shuttle moved slowly through air that seemed to glow with its own light while they passed the remains of vessels that represented dozens of different technologies and cultures, some with designs so alien that Amanda could not even guess what kind of beings had built them. "Look at that one." Amanda pointed to a ship that seemed to be made of living crystal that had grown into impossible shapes. "And that one there looks like it was carved from a single piece of stone, but stone that can somehow survive in space." As they flew deeper into the structure, they began to see that the walls were covered with symbols and markings that shifted and changed like living things, and Jake felt a strange sensation in his mind, like someone was trying to speak to him without words. The shuttle sensors led them to a chamber at the heart of the vast space, where they found something that made Jake question everything he thought he knew about human history and Earth's place in the galaxy there. In the center of the chamber was a small section that looked almost human in design, with technology that seemed familiar but much more advanced than anything Earth had ever built. And floating inside a damaged cryogenic pod was a man in what looked like an old military uniform. "My God, that is a human being," Amanda whispered while running her scanner over the pod and getting readings that confirmed what her eyes were telling her. "But how is that possible when no human ship has ever been this far from Earth?" Jake ordered his team to carefully extract the pod and bring it back to the Pioneer, where they could safely revive whoever was inside. And during the trip back through the debris field, he wondered what story this man would tell and how he had come to be in this place back on the Pioneer. Amanda and Ryan worked together to open the pod while Jake stood nearby with his security team ready for anything. And when the lid finally opened with a soft hiss, the man inside took a deep breath and opened his eyes. The stranger sat up slowly and looked around with confusion and fear before his gaze settled on Jake and the others, and when he spoke his voice was rough from long sleep, but his words were clearly in English with an accent that sounded familiar but old-fashioned. "Who are you people, and what year is this?" the man asked while trying to stand on unsteady legs. "The last thing I remember was my ship being destroyed and the structure pulling me inside before everything went dark." Jake helped the stranger to a chair and offered him water while Amanda ran medical scans to make sure he was healthy after what appeared to be a very long time in cryogenic sleep. "I am Captain Jake Harrison of the United Earthship Pioneer, and today is October 15th in the year 2437, Jake said, while watching the stranger face carefully. "What is your name, and how did you get here?" The man closed his eyes and was quiet for a long moment before looking up at Jake with an expression of sadness and determination that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "My name is Colonel Nathan. Brooks and I was part of a classified Earth military mission that launched from Luna Base in the year 2212. Nathan said while accepting the water and drinking it slowly. "We were sent to investigate strange signals that Earth Command detected coming from this region of space." Amanda stepped forward with her medical scanner still running and asked the question that everyone was thinking about. "Colonel, that was over 200 years ago. Which means you have been in that pod for longer than anyone has ever survived in cryogenic sleep." Nathan nodded slowly and looked around the medical bay with eyes that seemed much older than his face. The structure has been keeping me alive all this time, and I think it was waiting for more humans to arrive because something is happening here that requires human involvement. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as Nathan continued to speak about his experiences in the ancient structure and the things he had learned during his long imprisonment. Captain, you and your crew are in great danger because your arrival has started something that was meant to stay sleeping, Nathan said with urgency in his voice. This place is not just a ship or a station, but a prison built to contain something that could destroy everything we know and love about the universe. Captain Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Pioneer and watched the stars dance through the view screen, his dark eyes scanning the endless void beyond the Veil Nebula, where no human ship had ever traveled before, and the silence of deep space filled the air around him like a heavy blanket that pressed against his chest with each breath he took while thinking about the mission that brought them so far from Earth. The Pioneer was not the biggest ship in the fleet, but she was fast and strong with good engines that could take them places other ships could not reach. And Jake had been her captain for 3 years now, since the day Admiral Clark gave him the command and told him to explore the unknown regions beyond the mapped territories where strange signals had been detected by the long-range sensors. Lisa Martinez sat at the navigation station with her brown hair tied back in a simple knot and her fingers dancing across the control panel as she checked their position for the 5th time in an hour, her voice breaking the quiet when she spoke to the captain about the course they were following through space that seemed empty of everything except distant stars and cosmic dust. Captain, we are still on course for the target system, but the readings are getting stranger the closer we get to that energy signature the science team detected 3 weeks ago, Lisa said while adjusting the sensors and frowning at the display that showed numbers she had never seen before in all her years of deep space navigation. Ryan Cooper looked up from his engineering station where he had been monitoring the ship engines and power systems since they left the last fuel depot, his red beard covering most of his face except for his green eyes that always seemed to be thinking about some technical problem or another, and he cleared his throat before speaking to the bridge crew. The energy readings are not like anything in our databases, Captain, and the pattern keeps changing every few hours, like something is breathing or pulsing out there in the dark, Ryan said while wiping his hands on his work uniform and checking the power levels one more time to make sure they had enough fuel for whatever they might find. Dr. Amanda Foster stood near the science station with her blonde hair falling over her shoulders as she studied the data from the long-range scanners, her blue eyes bright with excitement because this was exactly the kind of discovery that made her choose a career in xenobiology. Instead of staying safe on Earth where everything was known and cataloged, this could be the find of the century, Captain, Amanda said with enthusiasm in her voice while pointing at the screen that showed wave patterns unlike anything from known alien civilizations. The energy signature is artificial, but the technology behind it is millions of years old, according to the quantum dating analysis I ran this morning. Jake nodded and walked closer to the main display where the target system appeared as a small dot of light, surrounded by empty space. But the sensors showed something massive hiding in the shadow of a dying red star that barely gave off enough light to see by, and he could feel something strange in the air like electricity before a storm. How long until we reach the system, Lisa? Jake asked while studying the star charts and thinking about the reports they would need to send back to Earth Command once they discovered what was generating the mysterious energy signals that had been detected by the deep space monitoring stations. 6 hours at current speed, Captain, but I recommend we drop to half speed when we get closer because the gravitational readings are not normal for a system with just one dying star, Lisa replied while making adjustments to their flight path and checking the navigation computers one more time. The bridge fell quiet again except for the soft humming of the ship systems and the occasional beep from the monitoring stations. And Jake could see his crew was nervous but excited about what they might find in a place where no human had ever been before, and he wondered if they were ready for whatever was waiting for them in the darkness. Hours passed slowly as the Pioneer moved through space toward the mysterious system. And when they finally arrived at the edge of the gravitational field, Jake ordered all stop and had the crew run full sensor sweeps of everything within range of their instruments. "Captain, you need to see this," Amanda called from her station with wonder in her voice while staring at readings that seemed impossible. "There is a structure orbiting the star, but it is huge beyond anything we have ever seen before. And it is definitely artificial." The main screen changed to show a long-range view of something that looked like a metal sphere the size of a small moon. Its surface covered with patterns and markings that seemed to shift and move in the dim light of the dying star, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat because this was clearly not made by any known civilization. "My God," Lisa whispered while running scans and getting readings that made no sense according to everything they knew about physics and engineering. "Captain, the structure is hollow inside and the energy signature is coming from somewhere deep within it." Suddenly, alarms began ringing throughout the ship as something grabbed the Pioneer with invisible hands and began pulling them toward the ancient structure, and Jake shouted orders to his crew as they fought against forces beyond their understanding while being drawn into the heart of something that had been waiting in the darkness for longer than human civilization had existed on Earth.